The Clone Wars featured many exceptionally bloody battles, but none had quite as much gore as the Battle of Drongar. That battle, which lasted for nearly 18 months, was one of the longest of the whole conflict, but it involved so much carnage for a completely different reason. Both sides largely refrained from using blasters. The Battle of Drongar was fought over a valuable healing plant called Bota, and to avoid damaging the plant, both the Republic's clones and the Confederacy's mercenaries used slug throwers, Vibroblades, and even hand-to-hand techniques in a bid to win the day. In this video, we're going to be talking about this nightmare of a battle and why it overwhelmed Republic medics.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
On the surface, Drongar doesn't really seem all that deserving of one of the Clone Wars' largest battles. Much of the planet was uninhabitable due to airborne spores, which could easily kill those who weren't wearing protection. It was a very humid world, dominated by rainforests and swampland. Constantly plagued by extreme weather, including fearsome monsoons and highly destructive electrical storms, it was located on the rimward edge of the Outer Rim territories beyond the borders of the CIS's largest enclave. When it was discovered by Nikto scouts 200 years before the Clone Wars, it initially seemed unremarkable and unsuitable for colonization. But there was a reason the Republic and Confederacy were so invested in laying claim to Drongar. Shortly before the Clone Wars, it was discovered that the planet was home to a plant called Bota, which, it turned out, could be refined into a highly potent medical substance. Bota had significant medical benefits for virtually every species in the galaxy, making it incredibly valuable. Its value was exacerbated by the fact that not only could it be found on Drongar, but it was also impossible to effectively synthesize as well. The plant also began to degrade after a short period when taken off Drongar, unless it was preserved in carbonite, meaning that control of the planet was the only way a faction could ensure reliable supply of Bota. Naturally, the Grand Army of the Republic was eager to lay claim to Drongar because of this, and the Confederacy wanted the planet as well, as there were many organic armies that fought for the Separatists. About 6 months into the Clone Wars, both the Republic and the Confederacy invaded Drongar, seeking to lay claim to the Bota. But the planet's harsh conditions complicated the battle. Frequent storms made air combat near impossible, while the high oxygen content of the atmosphere and the fragility of the Bota made the use of blaster weaponry unadvisable. Small blasters saw use in the battle nonetheless, but for the most part, clones and droid alike put up their blaster rifles, got out their slug throwers and vibroblades, and prepared to shank each other over a plant. The Battle of Drongar was more a series of small skirmishes over the Bota fields than a full-scale battle, fought by small units of clones, droids, and mercenaries working for both sides. Combatants were almost exclusively infantry, and close-quarters confrontations were far from uncommon. This meant there were many gruesome ways to die on Drongar, far more than there were on other battlefields of the Clone Wars. For many of the clones who fought on Drongar, however, being killed was greatly preferable to being wounded and surviving. Now, to truly appreciate why this battle was so bloody, we need to talk about Vibroblades a little. Vibro weapons were essentially the default melee weapons in the Star Wars universe, and the Vibroblade was the most common by far. Vibroblades ranged in size from knives to short swords and came in all manner of designs, but they all shared a similar trait. When activated, they used ultrasonic vibration generators to make their blades vibrate at incredible speeds, making them far deadlier than regular knives and swords. A glancing hit with a vibroblade would leave a gaping wound in an unarmored human, and vibroblade combat typically resulted in death or some very nasty wounds. In particular, Separatist mercenaries on Drongar were quite fond of using Vibroblades, and many clones learned that not even battle armor was a surefire way to protect against these deadly weapons. The carnage on Drongar was severe enough that over a dozen Republic mobile surgical units were called in to help treat the wounded, alongside a number of MedStar-class medical frigates. It still wasn't enough. The battle surgeons sent to Drongar were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of severely wounded clones who were being sent in, many of whom had nasty vibroblade wounds that were incredibly difficult to stitch up. To make matters even worse, the Republic's battle surgeons also had to reckon with airborne spores we mentioned earlier. The spores quickly found their way into the wounds of injured clones, a phenomenon that often resulted in what the surgeons termed spore sickness, an illness that often resulted in sepsis. Thus, not only did Republic surgeons have to work hard to stitch up wounds and treat burns, but they also had to work fast to prevent infection. The spores led to even more problems for the surgical units as well. They appeared to mutate rapidly, meaning that techniques for treating spore sickness were quickly rendered ineffective, and the work of cleaning spores from wounds often clogged up machinery, leaving the mobile surgical units in constant need of new hardware. For nearly 2 years, the Battle of Drongar remained a stalemate. Things only began to heat up at the start of 20 BBY, when those engaged on Drongar had started to get quite sick of the endless war they'd been forced into. It was around that time that a Jedi healer, Barriss Offee, joined the crew of the Republic Mobile Surgical Unit 7. There, she came to befriend surgeons Jos Vondar, Tolk Latreni, Chloe Merritt, and Zan Yant, as well as protocol droid I-5YQ and HoloNet reporter Den Dur, as the lot of them worked together to try and heal an endless stream of wounded clones. Offee showed up just in time for the battle to get interesting. Above Drongar, a complex net of backdoor plots saw the Republic Admiral in charge of the MedStar fleet killed, and around the same time, the Confederacy changed its strategy on the surface. Separatist craft began bombing runs, destroying entire Bota fields and putting the surgical units in harm's way. Due to sabotage, Republic Mobile Surgical Unit 7 was destroyed when the bombing started, killing Dr. Yant and forcing Offee and her team to relocate. About a week later, as the surgeons tried to get back to saving lives, an increasingly cynical Barriss Offee started to hunt down the spy responsible for the sabotage of RMSU-7. All the while, the Confederacy continued to grow more aggressive in its bid to take over Drongar, forcing the Republic to fall back. As casualties began to mount up, Republic surgeons began to use what Bota they had. After being wounded in one confrontation, Offee used the Bota to heal herself, and in doing so, she discovered a previously unknown property of the substance. It greatly enhanced the powers of Force sensitives. Offee began to develop an addiction to the Bota. The power it granted was intoxicating, and her growing obsession with it drew her close to the dark side of the Force. Fortunately, she realized this before it was too late and managed to reject both the dark side and her budding addiction. As she later realized, in doing so, she had completed the trials and become a Jedi Knight, something that was later confirmed by the Council when she returned to Coruscant. It was shortly after this that she finally determined that the Separatist spy was none other than Chloe Merritt, a member of her own team. Dr. Vondar shot Merritt shortly after she informed him of this, but for the most part it was too late. The Republic was already planning to evacuate from Drongar. The Separatists had taken control of much of the planet by that point, and to make matters worse, the Bota had started to mutate. Perhaps due to the Separatist bombardment, the Bota was quickly losing its healing properties, mutating into a useless weed. The Republic had managed to safely preserve 2 metric tons of the stuff for transport before the mutations began, but this development meant they wouldn't be getting any more. What Republic forces were left on the world regrouped around the Bota stores, waiting for evacuation. The Confederacy, realizing its mistake, became determined to seize the Republic's Bota stores and launched an all-out attack on all remaining Republic positions. They were on the verge of victory when the Republic Star Destroyer Resolution arrived in orbit above Drongar. The Resolution summarily annihilated the oncoming Separatist forces from orbit, buying the Republic forces time they desperately needed to evacuate Drongar. The Confederacy, in short order, followed suit, bringing the battle to an unceremonious end. By and large, the Battle of Drongar, an 18-month-long meat grinder of a conflict, was all for nothing. Very little Bota remained safely in suspension, and it wasn't nearly enough to make a significant impact on the war. This is all theory, but it's quite possible that it was the Battle of Drongar which radicalized Barriss Offee. Shortly after the battle and her ascension to Jedi Knight, she orchestrated the bombing of the Jedi Temple, an event that you're all surely familiar with. While she did reject the dark side during the Battle of Drongar, she definitely became more cynical over the course of the conflict, and the realization that it was all for nothing. To say nothing of the fact that one of the friends she made on the planet turned out to be a spy would surely have hit her hard.
This Republic is failing! It's only a matter of time.
So that's our look at the Battle of Dronga, one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the Clone Wars. Props to Discord user Yang for being very persistent in suggesting this one. And just before you guys go, if you want access to our behind the scenes Discord where you can meet the entire team, then do consider donating to our Patreon. And if you enjoyed the music we used in this video and plenty of our recent ones as well, check out our Relax Shack music channel where we do weekly uploads and you can use some of the songs in your own creative projects. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our main Geetsly's Discord server and our Geetsly's gaming network. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.